welcome to Sarah's Stamper Retreat. Today we're going to be making a bunch of cards using these gorgeous layering stencils from Pinkfresh Studios. So this is the Blooming Peony layering stencils, and there's 7 stencils in the set. And I'm also going to be using on a lot of them the coordinating stamp as well. You'll see when we come to it that you can actually make gorgeous cards without the stamp, but I am going to be using that on some of them. So I just thought this would be a nice one to do because it's a kind of like a card front that it makes. You can see this here. I think sometimes we can kind of look at these kind of products and think, oh well, they're beautiful, but how much use can I get out of them? So I thought that today we'd mix it up a little bit and make a bunch of cards in different ways using these. So the first card I'm going to make is the kind of obvious card, just using it as a card front. And I'm going to show how you layer the stencils for anyone that's not used these kind of products before. So I'm just going to show this on the first one because it's the same process for all of them. The other ones I've pre-prepared. So I'm going to stamp this first, and I'm just going to line this up so that it's 2 squares down, 2 squares in. I'm doing that so that if I need to line it up again, I know where to put it. So I'm going to ink this up with my Altenew Jet Black ink. So you see now we've got that kind of full coverage on the front of our card. And then we've got our layering stencils. Now these do have labels on, but they are quite difficult to see. So it says stencil 1 in the corner there. But I think they're quite easy to line up. So if you can't see the labelling, then you'll still be able to figure it out really easily. To be honest, the marking's so faint that the first time I did this, I didn't even know it was there, so I just kind of figured it out. I think you can use the image here as well to kind of work out what's for what. So then I'm lining this up with the outline that I've stamped. Just to note, for the one we're going to do later where you don't use the outline stamp, then this first layer you don't need to line up with anything. And then the layers that follow this, you line up with the colour that you'll put on in this layer. So then I'm going to use this Water Hyacinth Fresh Dye ink from Altenew. And I'm going to be using a lot of different inks in this video, just to give you an idea of kind of different looks that you can achieve and things like that. But you can do this with any dye inks you've got on hand. So I always use a circular motion onto the ink pad and then a circular motion onto the paper. And it's nice to use brushes for this as opposed to the foam bending tools, because where you've got quite a detailed stencil like this, the bristles seem to kind of get into the corners a little bit better than the foam. So then I'm going to reuse this yellow tape all the way through, so I'm going to take that off carefully. You can see we've got the background done now, and I actually quite like that, just with the white with the blue in the background. But we're going to move on to stencil 2, which is this one. So this one is the lightest colour on the flower. You can see that here, it's all these bits here. So I'm going to use these Altenew dye inks. So we've got Pink Diamond, Pinkalicious, Rubelite and Raspberry. So I'm going to start with the Pink Diamond, which is the lightest colour. Then I'm going to come in with the Citrus Burst Crisp Dye ink, and I'm going to use this number 10 detail blending brush from Altenew. You can do it with the larger brushes, absolutely fine, but some of my brushes are still drying, and this is a nice one for these smaller areas. I do like these brushes because you can hold them like a pencil instead of like putting them down like that, which I think it's a bit more of a comfortable grasp. So I like that this is a nice vibrant yellow. So then for this next one, I'm going to do the next pink in my set, which is the Pinkalicious. So then with this one, I'm going to use the Rubelite for the pieces of the flower. So that's the next strongest pink colour. And then I'm going to use my detail brush, and this is where the detail brush really comes into its own, and some orange cream ink to do the centres of these flowers. And this is where just using the detail brush to kind of keep it out of the pink as really useful. And you could obviously mask it off if you don't have a detail brush. And then I'm going to use the olive and the moss inks for the leaves. So I'm going to use the olive on this section. So in this section we're layering over and adding the moss. So this one's the last of our stencils. So then you can see that looks really beautiful where it's layered up, and it's really easy to do. So then I've used this thanks from the Splatter Sentiments hot foil plate set from Spellbinders. And I've done that on Spellbinders GLACIER cardstock. You can see I've overfoiled here a little bit, which is fine because I'm going to cut this out. So I'm going to cut around that. And like I always say, the hot foiling machine is really lovely to have. And I'll pop a link to a couple of hot foiling videos if you want to see the process in the description. But you can of course use any of your sentiments, and if you want the gold look you can obviously do heat embossing. I do really love the look of the hot foiling, but I'm sure you've got plenty of sentiments in your stash that you can use. So I'm just going to pop this up on some foam pads. Then I'm going to add that down here. So then we've got this really pretty card. And then you may have also noticed that I made a mistake here with my stamping, so I'm going to add a few enamel dots on. And I tend to do this if I make like a small mistake, then I'm not going to throw it away, I'm going to carry on with it. And I'm just going to cover it up with something, whether it be a die cut or the sentiment or some enamel dots. Don't want to waste all that work. And these, by the way, are the Pocket Full of Sunshine enamel dots from Altenew. So there's that card finished. I've got a couple more cards for you where we're going to use the whole card front in different ways, and a couple of cards where we're going to just use it completely differently. But in all of them, the layering up of the stencils is going to be the same. So I've pre-done all of the other ones. So for this next one, you can see I've not used the stamp on this. So with this, I've just laid down the blue like we did in the other one, but I've not had to line it up to anything. And then all the other stencils, you can line up with the blue instead of with the stamped image. So it comes out really nicely, and you can see we get this really nice soft look. So I've obviously used softer colours on this one than this one as well. You can see it kind of does give that like nice soft look to it. So with this one, I thought it'd be nice to kind of change it up a little bit, and I'm going to cut around the image. So I'm going to leave a small border. I don't want to cut any of the image off. So then I've got that all cut out, and I'm going to put this on this GLACIER card blank that I've made from Spellbinders cardstock. And I've just realised that I didn't tell you what colours I used for this. So I used the Jade and the Eucalyptus fresh dye inks for the leaves. I used this set of Altenew Crypt dye inks with the Blush Rouge, Crimson and Velvet for the flower. Then I used this same citrus burst as I used on the last one for the flowers, and the orange cream again for the centres. So I've cut this out. You can see there's a few little bits that go in the gaps. I'm just putting some foam pads behind all this so that I can pop it up on my card. So then I'm just going to have a look at this as a guide for where to put my other things. So I can see, for example, this is this piece, so it needs to go in here. So then I've done the same thanks on the same colour background for this one as the last one. And I'm going to pop a few foam pads behind that as well to pop it up. So I'm going to bring that one in to compare, because we've used the same layout for both, but by popping this up and not using the outline, we've kind of got a much softer, more dimensional look to this one. Obviously we've used poppier colours and the outline on this one, so this kind of pops out a lot more. So I think it's nice that even though we've used the whole background on both, we've got quite different looks. So then for this third one, I've used the whole background. So for this one, I stamped the outline in the Indigo Skies ink, and I also used the Indigo Skies just for this middle bit and the centres of these flowers. And then I used these other colours of the fresh dye ink. So the Water Hyacinth is the lightest colour, then the Alpine Aster is this next colour, Crystal Violet is this darker colour, and the Indigo Skies, like I said, I stamped with and used for the centres. So that's created this nice tone on tone look. And you'll also notice on this one that I didn't use that first stencil. I've left the background in white as opposed to colouring it. So that gives a bit of a different look as well. So I'm going to glue that onto 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inch card blank. And I've used this fine framed cover die from Old New on this one to cut out. So it cuts, as you can see, like a bunch of frames. And I've just taken 2 of those. So you can see that one's the smallest of the wider frames, because you get these really, really slim frames, and then the ones in the middle. And this is the largest of the wider frames. I'm just going to add some glue to the back of those and then add them to my card. And obviously, if you don't have the frames die, you can do this by layering 2 rectangle dies together to create a frame. But I really like this die because it can create a bunch of frames at once. I don't have to worry about whether they're going to be the same width all the way around. And then I'm going to add this one further in. And then I've hot foiled that same thanks we've been using onto some navy cardstock. I'm just going to cut around there. So then there's that card finished, and just adding that bit of detail I think gives another different look. So there are my 3 cards using the whole background, and now we're going to kind of use parts of the background to create different looks. So then for this next one, we're going to use this piece. So for this I've used the Jade and Eucalyptus fresh dye inks, and then I've used these pinks as well. So we've got the Pink Sand is the lightest colour, then the Dusty Rose, and then there's another colour called Toasted Mauve, which I haven't got tan just now, and the Redwoods. This Redwood is just this very dark one. The Toasted Mauve is this kind of, it's this colour here. And that was stamped in black ink. So I've got another Glacier card blank. And for this one, I'm just going to choose pieces of the image to cut out. So now I know I'm going to want this flower down here, and I know that I want this birthday sentiment on here, so I'm trying to position them so that I know where I want to hot foil my birthday sentiment. So I'm going to hot foil it straight onto the card blank this time. And if I'm hot foiling straight onto a card blank, I want to make sure that I keep the foil quite close to the actual hot foil plate. I'm going to take more time to kind of trim it down a bit so that there's less chance of it over foiling. So I should have said that that birthday that I've used there is from this same hot foil set. I've also used this Wishes to just foil another piece of the same colour cardstock. And then as I cut bits out, I'm going to lay them out on the card to kind of see how much I want and where I want it. I've kind of played around with a few different things, but I think I'm going to go with this. So I'm going to add some foam pads to the back of my cut out pieces. So I'm going to put that on there, and then I can turn it over and cut off the edges. I like it to turn it over to cut off the edges so that I can use the card blank as like a template for where I want to cut. And I've got a few of these Pinkfresh Studio glitter drops in the leaf colour. And scatter a few of those around. So now that I've got a layout that I like, then I can just pick up the gems with my pickup pen, pop on a really tiny blob of glue, like you really don't need much at all, and put them back down on the glue. And there's our card using the same layering stencils but with a completely different look because we've completely changed the layout. So then for this next card I've got this piece which I have used these for orange inks, so the Sunkissed, the Fire Brick, the Orange Cream and the Autumn Blaze. That's for this. Then I used the Citrus Burst for these smaller flowers, and then I used the Parrot and the Bamboo for the leaves, and I used the same Water Hyacinth one for the background. And I've got that, but again I want to do something a little bit different on this. I want to do a bit of decoupage, so I'm going to ink up just the flower bit of this again, and you can see I'm just using a smaller piece of cardstock because I only need the flower. I'm going to do that twice. Then I'm going to use the same process as before for colouring them in, but obviously I only need the flower stencils this time, so that's stencils 2, 3, 4 and 5. And I'm not going to show you the whole process of inking these up because you have seen me do that on the big image. But again, I'm starting from the lightest to the darkest, and to save time you can hop from one image to the other. So I'm going to do this template on both of them with the same orange, and then I'll switch to the next template and the next orange. But if by doing them both side by side you save a little bit of time. Then I'm going to cut this piece down, so I want to make it into a square card. So I've cut this down to 4-inch square, and then I've got 4 1/4 inch square of pale papaya cardstock from Stampin' Up. And then this is GLACIER cardstock that we've been using. I've also foiled my thanks onto GLACIER cardstock, and for this one I've used this thanks here from this hot foil and die plate set, the B-Bold Glimmer sentiments from Spellbinders. So all of the sentiments come with coordinating dies. If you watch my channel a lot you'll know that I use this set all the time. So now that I know where this is going to be positioned, I'm going to layer up my card. And so then now I want to have a look at which are the pieces of the flower that feel furthest back and which are the ones that feel furthest forward. So I'm going to essentially cut off the pieces of the flower that are the furthest back. So for example this leaf here is going to be far back, so I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to cut off this petal here, but I'm going to cut out this orange bit because that bit is going to be closer, so that's going to get popped up. And any little pieces like this I'm going to pop up on a foam pad and stick onto my card as I go so that I don't lose any of them or forget where they go. So I'm going to do the same with this petal here. This bit is further back, but this bit is kind of rolling over the top, so I'm going to pop up this bit that's rolling over the top but cut it off the other bit. And I hope that even if this is a bit confusing right now, once you see it at the end it all makes sense. And I'm doing the exact same with this petal here, cutting off the back and popping up this bit. Then there's that big piece on, so that's layer 1. You could totally use it like that because that gives a really nice level of dimension, but I'm going to go one step further and just add on some of these bits that are really far forwards. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to cut out again and I'm going to layer those up one more time. In fact I might do this one too. So then I'm going to add some foam pads to the back of my sentiment as well. So I'm going to pop that on there. And then you can see we've got this gorgeous card with so much dimension on that flower. It really does make it stand out and look more 3D. So then let's bring in the other cards. So then there's all 5 of today's cards. You can see we've got quite a lot of different looks from our layering stencils. I'd love to know which of the cards is your favourite. Let me know in the comments below. I really hope that you enjoyed today's video. If you did, I'd appreciate you clicking like, and you can also press subscribe if you'd like to see future videos. If you press the bell button and select all, then YouTube will also notify you when I've got a new video available. All of the products that I've used for today's cards are listed in the description below, and there's also a link there to my blog where you can find a picture supply list if that helps you find what you're looking for. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope to see you again soon.